Hi, my name is Michael Goodfriend, and I'm the executive producer of the Play On podcasts. There are a lot of moving parts in making these podcasts come to life, not the least of which is the director. Once we've gotten our translator on board, we turn to our director to get the wheels in motion on pre-production. Now, we always consult the playwright. The playwright, of course, is William Shakespeare, but by playwright in this sense, I mean the translator, the person that was commissioned by Play On Shakespeare to translate Shakespeare's play into modern English verse. In Coriolanus, what mattered most to the translator, Sean San Jose, was that the director be someone who understood and appreciated his vision for a cast that would be comprised primarily of women and women of color. It was our senior producer, Miriam Lauba, who suggested Kate Wisniewski. Kate is an actor and a voiceover artist who co-founded a theater company called Upstart Crow Collective, a Seattle-based group that produces classical plays with diverse casts of women and non-binary people, reimagining these works for a contemporary audience. In addition to founding Upstart Crow Collective with fellow collaborators Rosa Joshi and Betsy Schwartz, Kate has an extensive history performing on stages across the country and as a voiceover artist and a teacher whose voice can be heard on numerous games produced by Nintendo and other leading outlets. Kate's work as a groundbreaking theater artist with a long history working on classic plays, especially Shakespeare, made her the ideal candidate for this job. And we are so lucky that she accepted. I'm glad to have her here with me right now. Kate, welcome to the Play On podcast, Coriolanus bonus content series.
Thank you. Wow. It's always amazing to hear an introduction like that. Thank you, Michael.
Well, I'm only telling the truth. It's all online. I'm just reading from your bio. You have had an amazing career and you're right in the thick of it. I just want to ask you, when did you first encounter the works of William Shakespeare as an artist? But beyond an artist, as just a regular human?
I've watched some of these interviews, and so I knew that question was coming, and I was trying to remember when that might actually be. And I can't tell you when the first time I saw a Shakespeare play. I can't remember. But what I do recall as being sort of the first influence and the person who I would say turned me on to Shakespeare was an English teacher, like many of us. And my English teacher was a man named Bruce Bechtel, who is the Bruce Bechtel from Fun Home, if you know that musical and graphic novel. He was an incredible teacher, and he loved to read to us in an early modern dialect, the most salacious parts of the plays. So he would close the door and he made us feel like, oh my God, we're listening to something we shouldn't be listening to. And of course that got us really worked up and excited. And it was, that was the beginning of it for me. I just
You're in high school at this point?
Yeah, high school.
And in a public high school?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And where was this? What part of the country?
This was in north central Pennsylvania. In the boonies, really in the boonies. Yeah.
Well, by boonies, you mean like what was the nearest big town?
State College, which is where Penn State was about an hour west of us. And
your parents, what did they do?
Oh, my dad and his wife were both college professors. It was a college town. And yeah, but very rural, very, out in the sticks.
So, and what did your parents teach?
My dad was an art professor, and his wife was she taught in what they called then the speech theater department. So she didn't really teach much theater. She was mostly public speaking, that kind of thing.
But words were always around you. Language was a huge part of your growing up.
Yeah.
And did you know always that you were going to be an actor?
No. I was always involved in theater, and but it never really occurred to me that it was something that I could do as a profession. I wasn't a theater major in undergraduate school. It wasn't until I kind of happenstanced on the apprentice intern program at Actors Theater of Louisville that I realized, oh, you could actually do this for your job. and that
you
was
happened upon it. How did you happen upon that?
I didn't know anything about it. Actually, my father, who, because he was at a university, he was always getting all kinds of information about internships and that kind of thing. And he called me up one day and he said, this might be something you would like to do. He was always the one who said, you should work in theater. You should. And I was like, what do you want? People don't do that. and so I applied for it and I got in.
How old were you?
20. I think I turned 21 when I was there.
Were you in college at the time, or were you just kind of bouncing around?
Yeah, I hadn't finished yet. And that was the deal. He said, I will support you if you do this, but you have to go back and finish your undergraduate degree. So that was the deal we struck.
Which was where?
It was at another state college in Pennsylvania called Millersville. And I was a poli-sci major.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So you went in to study poli-sci. And I
didn't even start with poli-sci. I started in the arts. I was a photography major, and then I switched to poli-sci because I really just wanted to be a general ed major. There was no such thing. And I figured out pretty quickly that poli-sci was the department where you needed the least number of credits in the department to graduate. So I could take as many other kinds of classes as I wanted. So that was really my strategy. So I made my own general ed thing.
Interdisciplinary studies. You were a liberal arts major.
Yeah, basically, yes. Yeah.
And did you think you were going to be a teacher like your folks, or
no, it sounds kind of irresponsible to say this now, I think, but I was a college student in the early 80s. And for people who are as old as me and can remember that time, it was a terrible time for getting jobs. The job market was horrible. And so in a way, it made me feel like, well, I can do whatever I want because there's nothing out there that is like, there are no jobs. So I might as well just do what I want. And I also, my father was a painter and an artist. And he also said, he was very encouraging, like find your way. He was one of those kinds of people. Take your time, find your way, give yourself lots of life experience. And that's what I did. I traveled a lot. I, bummed around the country. I traveled outside of the country. I just kind of, spent my 20s really just bumming around.
Exploring.
Yeah.
And you found your way through your father's light nudging to the Actors Theater of Louisville Apprentice Program, mm-hmm. which I know of through my own work. And I know it's fantastic. And especially then, right? John Jory was the artistic director at that point.
He was.
Correct. Yeah. And it was like this kind of furnace for new plays that was the Humana Festival and all of the new playwrights that were coming through in that era, especially. So you're there. It's a year long, that
mm-hmm.
apprenticeship program. And what did that do for you?
Well, I wasn't an acting apprentice. So the interns were, we were in the management side of things, and the actors were the apprentices. And I was a public relations intern. Again, like something that I had no experience with. I had no reason to ever get this position, but I just kind of got it. I was lucky enough. And I was just surrounded by all these really incredible artists and people. And it was just a really wonderful learning experience.
Well, and PR is an art in itself. I mean, the figuring out how to sell something, right?
Yeah.
And builds relationships. So at that point, you still didn't know you were going to be an actor. Is that right?
No.
So how did you, what was the sort of the point of departure into acting?
I was always kind of in it, kind of along in the side, almost in a way that was a little embarrassing because so many of my friends were professionals and I would sort of like, it was like my little thing. But I did a lot of side routes where I got away from theater. I lived in the city for a while in New York City, and left the city and moved out to Washington State, and was really got away from theater, and but eventually decided to move back to the city. In this case, it was Seattle. And it was a little bit against my will. I didn't really want to move back to the city. And I made a promise to myself that if I was going to go back to the city, I would get back involved in theater. And I started taking classes and applied to grad school. And I got into grad school at the American Repertory Theater. And so that was kind of the beginning of taking myself seriously as an actor.
ART in Boston at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
So you were going coast to coast in a sort of floating through life kind of way, finding your way over to Actors Theater of Louisville. And then what led to Washington State? How did Washington State happen upon you?
That again was really this is how I really was just bumming around. I was working at in New York City, I was working at an actors agency, writers and artists. I was an assistant to the legitimate agent for actors and also the literary agent at that office. And again, this was in the early 80s. And I was constantly talking to actors, and I was helping them, with all of the stuff of their work as they were getting, placed in different gigs. And at that time, Seattle was a pretty vibrant, theater city. And I knew a lot of actors through the agency who worked out there. And so when I decided I was ready to leave New York, I just picked it randomly and just got in my car and drove and lived in the YWCA for a while and just kind of found my way,
Did you contact some of those actors that the agent you worked with?
I did. Yeah. And I contacted some theaters that I knew through the agency. Dan Sullivan was at the Seattle Repertory Theater at that point. He very graciously met with me and Dan
Sullivan, the director who's had many, many Broadway credits.
Yeah. He was the artistic director of Seattle Repertory Theater at that point. The Empty Space Theater, Kurt Beatty was the artistic director. He also graciously met with me, just, kind of opened up their arms and said, yeah, if there's stuff that you want to do. And again, at that point, I was not really looking for work as an actor. I was helping out in the literary department. I was, just doing that kind of stuff.
So interesting, Kate, because, the normal, no artist's life is normal, right? But most actors that you hear about or that you talk to, they started out to be an actor. I've never heard of somebody going the route that you've gone, which is sort of bouncing around in PR and agencies and whatnot, and then just kind of falling into, it sounds like, a career as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So you ended up going to ART, into the training program there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, 2 years?
Yes.
You came out of there, it's what, 1985, 87? Don't tell us what if you don't want to.
Well, it was actually later, because it wasn't until I graduated from there in 1999. So I was much older.
So you had a lot of life experience. You were with a bunch of kids.
Well, one of the lovely things about the ART program at that time, I actually wasn't even the oldest one in my class. They were really interested in a very wide range of ages in our classes at that point. That changed, but having been a teacher now for a couple of decades, I understand why you might not want older students, but just because it's easier to train younger people.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that our class benefited from the range of ages, having people with lots of life experience, and then people who were right out of undergraduate school.
And the choice then from ART was to go back to Seattle, and you just picked Seattle, or did you have a job that took you there?
No, I had been living in Seattle. My husband and I owned a house in Seattle. So the intention was always to go back. It wasn't to stay on the East Coast.
I see. So you went to ART. You were married by the time you went to ART.
We weren't actually married at that point, but we had been together for a long time and then did become married. But we owned a house together, so we might as well have been married.
Okay. So you go back to Seattle, you have your degree from Harvard. And what leads to Upstart Crow?
So once I got back to Seattle, I started just doing what every actor does, just kind of, knocking on doors, auditioning. And I was working on a play at a theater that no longer exists called Tacoma Actors Theater, which was about an hour south of Seattle. And I was commuting with my also co-founder of Upstart Crow, Betsy Schwartz. And she and I were driving back and forth from Tacoma to Seattle every day and bemoaning the lack of opportunities for women who wanted to do classical work. And we just decided over the course of that 2 months that we were in so much in the car together that we would just produce our own, at that point, all-female Shakespeare. And we talked about it, who's the director, and we both agreed that Rosa Joshi was a great choice, and we went to her and she said absolutely. So the three of us started from there.
I always say, why does this have to be on the stage? Why does this have to be a piece of theater? What is it that I can do here that I couldn't do in any other medium, right? So for me, one of the ways that I've found that to answer that question is that whatever I create invites an audience to complete the picture. It invites the audience to actively participate in the understanding of the story, in the watching of the story, in the visualizing and the hearing of the story.
How did you know of Rosa Joshi at that point?
I was teaching at Seattle University, and Rosa was also in the department at Seattle University. And Betsy had worked with Rosa as a director.
She and I were actually together in grad school, and I was in her thesis project.
I've heard about that.
She put the stage on top of the audience and the audience on the stage in an unusual Romeo and Juliet starring Sanaa Lathan, among many other now famous people. But a very unusual director, of fantastic personality, very vibrant, very just full of life and curiosity. And obviously made a strong impression on you and Betsy Schwartz. So you contact her, you say you'd like to do this Shakespeare play with all women. Had you picked the play yet? Did you know what it was going to be? Which Shakespeare play?
We didn't, but we were kind of strategic. We ended up doing King John, and there were a couple of reasons for that. We knew we wanted to do a political play. That was just an interest of all three of ours. We wanted to do a play that wasn't as familiar to folks because we thought we would, we just thought, well, a play like King John, people don't have preconceived ideas about what it is or who it is, or maybe they don't even know the play. So doing it with all women felt like we might be able to get away with this, right? We're not going to get slammed. It ended up being a kind of a great play for the time. This was the hanging Chad election.
This is what you call close. This is the state of Florida. 99.87% of the vote has been counted so far. The Secretary of State has Al Gore trailing the president-elect in the state that proved to be pivotal by 565 votes.
So just the concept of, legitimacy that's so prevalent in that play felt really current. And it was a choice that we made long before that whole thing happened with the election. But yeah, it was, and it ended up being wildly successful. I mean, it was really lightning in a bottle. We didn't know, we didn't have any idea how it was going to turn out. We didn't have an approach, we hadn't developed the approach that we have now. And it really was just a fantastic project.
How did that evolve? How did the company evolve to become a thing?
After we did that production, it was 6 years before we did the next production. And part of that was just the circumstances of our lives. Rosa took a leave of absence from the university, and we were self-producing. And so it was just a tremendous amount of work. It took us, I think, 6 years to forget how hard it was before we were willing to step in and do it again.
There's an old saying, I think it's Michael Redgrave, if I'm not mistaken, that every actor dreams of starting her own theater company and then they wake up.
Yes, exactly. It was a little bit like that, right? And even when we did Titus Andronicus, which was our second production, we still weren't thinking long term. It was really we've and even to this day, even though now we are we definitely are a company that is looking to the future and has lots of plans, we're still very much project based. So that's been the kind of ethos from the beginning. We're not interested in a building or a huge management staff. We're really focused on, okay, what's the next project, what's the next production, and what do we need to do to come, pull together to make that happen.
So no venue, you don't have a permanent home. The company coalesces around the play when the play is chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't program it ahead of time. You do, obviously, once you've chosen it, you've got a start date and an end date. But prior to that, there's no lead up to publicity or anything. You haven't chosen a season.
No. And we're actually really not interested in doing that. I mean, we want to stay project based in this way. We've all been involved in other small companies and have seen what can happen, right? The tail starts to wag the dog, and suddenly there's this big thing that has to be created and maintained that actually doesn't have anything to do with the play. And so we're pretty clear-headed about that part. As we've grown, though, we've been able to we are now a lot more forward-looking. We're not just thinking, what are we going to do 6 years from now? So yeah, we're actively right now we're actively involved in talking to producers around the country about future co-productions and that kind of thing. So,
and one of them being at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which is exactly that huge institution, triple venue, massive organization that you described, and you're this company in residence there. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to worry about any of the overhead, any of that stuff. You come in, you do your job. The ensemble becomes the sort of the artist in rep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like the best of all worlds.
Well, yeah, they bring us in for our particular vision, our particular focus, our way of working. We work with their artists. And that is actually how we have grown in terms of our the way we like to work. We used to self-produce, and it became apparent that so many women and then non-binary artists, once we began to focus on that level of inclusion as well, wanted to work with us. And because we were self-producing, we were not really able to afford to pay them what we felt they deserved. And we decided to go into a co-producing model so that we could pay people what they're, what they should be paid.
Had you ever heard of Sean San Jose before this production of Coriolanus came to you?
No, I hadn't. No, Sean's work was completely new to me. And it's been one of the lovely things about this project is having gotten the opportunity to work with him on it.
But the play Coriolanus was not new to you, correct?
No, it wasn't new to me, although I had never worked on it as an actor. I had seen multiple productions of it. So I knew the play, but I had never had the opportunity to get in the inside of it as an actor.
Well, your knowing the play, at least having seen it a few times, already put you like ahead of the competition.
It's strange. It's strange that I've seen 4 productions of this play, because it's not a play that's done that often.
And what did you think? So, I mean, seeing it 4 different ways, how did it land on you? I mean, what did you come away with by the time I gave you a call and said, hey, we're doing this series? I
have to say, I felt like my experience of watching the play was that I found it incredibly confusing. There was always some point in every production that I saw where I thought, what's going on right now? You know, what is happening? How did we get to this place? And so when you called me about working on it, I felt like, well, my goal is to bring some level of clarity to this play, because it's so dense. And there is a point in the story where I think it can become very confusing. So I think that's one of the beautiful things about Sean's translation. I think it really clarifies it. The language in the play is incredibly dense. And I think that is one of the issues for a contemporary audience watching it. You know, it's Shakespeare's last tragedy, and he's clearly at the height of his powers as a writer. I find the play to be incredibly ambiguous, and I think that may also be one of the reasons that it can be hard to follow at a certain point, because you're like not sure. I think you're not sure where you're supposed to land, how you're supposed to feel about it.
Is there a point of view? And do you feel like if Shakespeare had anything to say, what is it?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. And I feel like, you know, I like to call these plays the political war plays, because he has this whole bunch of plays, and I include the Roman plays in that, and obviously the history plays, and a number of the tragedies. I feel like they all kind of have this interesting, similar story that he's trying to tell about the nature of power, the nature of leadership. And I feel like, and maybe this is just my own, you know, political bent, but I feel like all of the plays are cautionary tales. And I like to think about why was he telling these particular stories, right? I mean, we can read historically about why the Roman stories might have been interesting to him, and certainly the English history plays. But I feel like he must have been, I think he must have been choosing these stories as a way to reflect on his own society and on what was happening in Jacobean and Elizabethan England at the time. And they feel like one of the similar things is a caution to the leaders of his time, who we know were seeing these plays. But I also think, wow, they're incredibly subversive. Like, how did he get away with it? That always amazes me, that he tells these stories about the fall of leaders that seems like he could have gotten into a lot of trouble, and he was brilliant enough to figure out how to maneuver around that.
Well, and it was incredibly dangerous to come down on any one side of any argument in that time, especially when Shakespeare was walking around London. It wasn't uncommon to see people hanging from rafters for treason or for saying the wrong thing. I often wonder if Coriolanus might somehow be related to, there was an Irish general who turned on the Queen.
Right.
And who was a real war hero, but I can't remember his name. And some scholar out there listening is going to know and be pounding the steering wheel if if they're listening. But this war hero who switched sides and, could have been this great leader, and instead just gambled and went the wrong way in history.
To me, I think that it's a play about, and again, I think a lot of the political war plays fall into this category, where it's a cautionary tale to me about corrupt politicians. To me, it's about how people, and I include Coriolanus in this, how the citizens, how Coriolanus are manipulated by politicians who want to maintain power. And I feel like that, in a way, is what maybe, I just wonder, was this his message to people like Elizabeth? Was this his way of saying, look at those people around you who are, are they really speaking and working in your self-interest, in the interest of our country, or are they actually in it for their own power? And it feels to me like that's really where the play lands for me. It's those politicians, it's Sicinius, it's Brutus, it's even Menenius, who are really interested in maintaining their position, no matter what.
So
and they use everybody.
Who is Coriolanus in that reading of it, in that interpretation? Is Coriolanus a hero? Is Coriolanus a villain? Are we meant, in your interpretation, do you come down on one side or the other?
I don't think he's either. I feel like I feel like on the one hand, he is a person who has been groomed from the time he was a child by his society, by his mother, to be a warrior, and he does that brilliantly. When they want him to become something other than that, that's when he has a hard time switching. And so part of it for me is, the idea of a person who, that feels very contemporary to me. We use people in the military to do a certain job. It's a difficult job. It's a dirty job. It's a violent job. And then we expect them to turn that off when we don't want them to do that anymore. And you see that happen in Titus Andronicus. You see it in this play, where you feel like you've created this person because you needed him so much. And he's really good at it. He single-handedly takes down a whole city. And then you expect him to switch on a dime and to become a smooth talking politician. And then you destroy him because he's not able to do that. So to me, I don't know if that makes him a hero. I don't know that he's a hero, but I do feel like he's one of the few people in the play who actually says exactly how he feels. You know where he's coming from. You might hate what he's saying,
but he's telling the truth.
But he's telling his truth. His truth.
And the people admire him for it and connect to him for it almost throughout. But then they're swayed by whispers and gossip and innuendo.
Right. I think also it's a keen portrayal of how easily the citizens can be manipulated. And that also feels really important to me, that they are, at the beginning of the play, they're starving. So
and why is that? What is the backstory there? Why are the people starving?
Because grain is being hoarded, and they're not getting what they need to eat. And there is grain there, but the patricians are hoarding it. So they're demanding access to food, and they have reason to be rioting and to be fighting against the patricians, but they're easily manipulated.
And yet, if Coriolanus had been left alone and did as he pleased, who's to say he would have been a good leader, right? I mean, he could have led them into even worse straits, more misery. Clearly a very self-centered person.
I mean, he's a good military leader, right?
Right.
He's a good military leader, but we don't know if he would ever have been a good. I mean, it could be that the fears that the tribunes have are well-founded, that he would become a tyrant.
Right. And it seems also like as much as Sicinius and Brutus manipulate people, they kind of seem to have a solid grasp of what is right for the people.
Yeah. Well, they are. I mean, it's the beginning of the Roman Republic. So there's they are representatives of the plebeians, and they're trying to, I think they believe they're trying to accurately represent the needs of the people. I don't think any of them think they're villains.
No.
They just love power.
Right. And, you said you referred to in one of the first rehearsals with the actors, I remember you saying that Sicinius and Brutus as tribunes are sort of like a very early iteration of what we now call representatives from the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about how the politics were arranged, how governing was layered at this point in history.
Well, I'm no historian, but from my research on the era, it was so this is 5th century. This is 5th century BC Rome, and recently the monarchy had been overthrown, the Roman monarchy, and as a matter of fact, as a young soldier, Coriolanus had fought against the monarch. And so the system that was in place at this point was 2 consuls who are at the top, and there are 2 of them, so that there has to be some back and forth between the 2 of them instead of one, because the Romans were really afraid of a new monarch, of some kind of tyranny. And then underneath that, you have senators who are of the patrician class. And then you have these newly minted tribunes who come from the plebeian class. And so, structurally, you can see how, our democracy with the House of Representatives and the Senate are, in some kind of way, a mirror of that setup. And there is there's a vote. There's a vote that has to take place for Coriolanus when he becomes in his attempt to become a consul. The plebeians have to vote for him. They have to give them their voices, which is a kind of vote.
I will, sir, flatter my brethren, the people, to earn a dearer opinion from them. It's a trait they consider genteel. And since their wish is to have me tip my hat rather than have my heart, I will practice bowing and nod my head to them hollowly. That is, sir, I will feign the charm of the man of the people and play it fully to all who desire that. So I ask you, may I be your consul?
So, okay, you get this incredibly complex, difficult script handed to you. You've agreed to do the job. How do you map it out? We brought in a dramaturg, Amrita Ramanan, right? You and she worked together closely. What was that process like? How did you begin to line up what this story was going to be and how it was going to be told?
Having Amrita was so wonderful because she had worked as a dramaturg on the play before, so she knew it very well, and she knew it structurally really well. And I think because I had seen the play a few times, I knew, at least for me as an audience member, where the places were in the play that I got bogged down, where I felt like, okay, this gets to be difficult to understand. And so we worked really hard on those little parts of it, especially there's a big battle. There's actually the only battle in the play happens in the first act. We did some major cuts of that.
Oh, they are at it. Their loud sounds are our warning. Scale up now.
We maintained most of the play, but there were chunks where we felt like we needed to do some judicious editing just to kind of help move the story along. And then it was really just a process of I think, any actor or director's process of looking at a play, of really breaking it down into, Shakespeare's plays are structured in that 5-act process in kind of a brilliant way anyway. So following what's happening act by act. Of course, that changes when you get into the episodic nature of the podcasts. But then, the basic work of storytelling beats and really trying to figure out how that's moving the plot along, and also the different worlds of the play. Like what are those worlds? There's the domestic world, there's the world of warfare, there's the political world, and then there's the world of the Volscians, the enemy of the Romans,
who Coriolanus ends up going to join.
Yes.
Because he admires Aufidius, his arch nemesis, so much, he ends up going over, rejecting his people and going to Aufidius and to the Volscians.
Yeah, and that's an interesting relationship. It's a little bit like a Hal and Hotspur kind of relationship, right? I think Shakespeare examines that a lot in his plays. These two men who are very, very similar, but are also arch enemies, and they can't live with each other and they can't live without each other, kind of thing.
This is a question that always comes up, and it's an important one. What is the dramaturg? Why do we need one?
Oh, wow. You really need one on this play. So a dramaturg, I think, again, it depends on every production, how you use a dramaturg, but dramaturgs were, before the days of director-led theaters, before there even was the role of a director, there was the dramaturg. They were the director. And the dramaturg now is someone who is focuses on the deep research of the play. So if there are particular parts of the world of the play that you need more information about, if the actors need more information about, they are there to help provide that information. But I think they also are because dramaturgs often are working on new plays, they have a fantastic understanding of structure, and they can help you understand and guide you towards how the story needs to be told. If there are things that you are missing in terms of what, we as Westerners, we have a certain kind of innate understanding of of a kind of storytelling. And what are those pieces that need to happen so that it all culminates in a satisfying experience? And I think the dramaturg is someone who really has their eye on that constantly, and can help a director not get into the weeds too much and get back to the bigger picture of what is that structure that I have to kind of be following along. And then also helping the actors with that too. So everybody is sort of on board, understanding that while an actor may have a specific, they have their role that they're playing, how does that feed into this bigger piece of structure so that they're telling their part of the story in a way that feeds into the wholeness of the piece.
So you work with the dramaturg, you and Amrita get together, you basically dissect that script, you pull it apart, you find the spine of not just the whole play, but broken down act by act, and then scene by scene, in this case, episode by episode. And then within that episode, we have scenes.
Right.
Really specifying what is important here, what is the event
Right.
that we are trying to convey, that we want to make clear.
And I think of it like, what has to happen to get us to the next point? Like, what has to happen here? You know, what has to happen in the storytelling?
Where do we go from here?
What do the actors have to hit? Because if we don't get it here, then it's not going to make sense when we get further on. And you base those choices on what's the version of your version of Coriolanus, right? What's the story you want to tell this time? Because these plays are so huge and complex, you can tease out different stories, different versions. And once you've decided this is the way we're going with this particular production, then how do all those things feed into that?
Even though it's so clearly connected to your work as an artist, why Coriolanus told by all women and non-binary actors?
I think it's an opportunity. I know that when we first started talking about the casting the podcast, that the decision had already been made to cast a woman in the role of Coriolanus. And then pretty quickly when we started, when we first met with Sean and we were talking about casting, it pretty quickly shifted to being, all right, we're going to do this with all women and non-binary actors. And I mean, for me, one of the things, again, it's about opportunity. It's about, you know, access to roles that women and non-binary actors never get access to. And why not? You know, they have as much skill as any other performer. They should have access to some of these great roles as well. I think it also is interesting for an audience who, to, even if they're not fully conscious of it, to hear these stories told by actors that they're not used to hearing them embodied by. It can open up the plays in different ways. It can it can reveal things that maybe you haven't heard before. And then the other thing that's important to me, and is certainly a big part of Upstart Crow, it's also about representation for young actors, young female and non-binary actors, to see that they actually can have access to these plays as well. I think the works of Shakespeare can sometimes feel like it's this rarefied thing that only certain people get to do. And it's really important to me as an artist, as a producer, as an educator, to provide access to people and make them feel that they can be in these stories, that they can see themselves in these stories, that they don't have to feel like, oh, that's only certain people who get to do that. And I think that's, you know, if people don't get to see themselves or hear themselves in these plays, then they don't imagine themselves getting to do it. And I think it's really important to provide that opportunity.
You've done a lot of voiceover work yourself as an actor. What about this was new for you getting into, was this your first experience doing a podcast? Yes. We had done a, I guess you would call it a radio play version of Richard III with Upstart Crow. It was a production that we had done on stage, and then we very quickly threw it together during the COVID times as an audio play. But we did not do it as a podcast. So this was the first time I've had an opportunity to work in this particular medium. And what's the challenge? What did you learn? How did it change for you working in this medium? I think first of all, it was getting used to the idea of the episodic nature of it,
that was you are, as an actor, you're used to working on these plays in 2.5 hour chunks, right? 2.5 to 3 hour chunks, and thinking of the story that way. And so thinking of it episodically, where it really had to, each episode had to kind of stand on its own and end with a cliffhanger. And, Catherine Eaton did such a beautiful job of providing that form. So
Catherine Eaton, the writer-director who adapted this series from the script that Sean San Jose translated into the podcast form.
Yeah. And then I think when I first started talking to Daniel Benjamin, who was the sound designer, I said to him, okay, to me, this feels like it's working. It's like making a film without visuals. That's how we have to think of the sound, because the Next Chapter podcast approach is the sound design is so lush. It does create an incredibly immersive experience. You really feel like you're in this specific place and time. And I think for me, the challenge was making sure that was well balanced with the text, because of course, coming from the world of theater, you're an actor, Michael. How do you feel when the sound designers and the directors suddenly underscore your big monologue? You're like, uh-oh, I'm not doing something right here, right? So, it was kind of, for me, coming from the world of theater, it was really finding the right balance between with Palmer Heffron's composition, the sound design, making sure that was all a part of it, because it is a completely oral experience, but also leaving room for the text, and especially the complex text of this play, really rhetoric heavy text, where you need to be able to focus. I think as an audience member, you really need to be able to focus and listen to the text. Otherwise you will, it's easy to get lost. It's such a complex, the language is so complex.
Apprehend him.
Go, call the people. Here now, you I call a traitor and revolutionary, an enemy to the people's welfare. Obey, I charge you, to your trial.
Off, goat!
Hands off him!
Off, you rotten thing, or I'll shake your bones right out of your garments!
Help, people!
So even in this medium, dialogue is the most important thing.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, and Daniel said, and that's one of the things that Daniel said too from the beginning. He said that the dialogue was king, and that was always going to be in the forefront.
So give us a little bit of an idea, right? So you've recorded, the actors have recorded, the rehearsals obviously are past, everybody goes home, but your work is not done. We're now in post-production. What is post-production? What goes into the soup at that point?
So the process was that we would first, what we called lock the radio play. So the dialogue lock would happen, where we would, you and Miriam and myself,
Miriam Laba, our senior producer,
and
right?
the engineers who were working on the dialogue,
Sadaharu Yagi, Larry Walsh, right?
We would put together, we had multiple takes. We would decide which takes were the right ones. We would piece it all together so that we have a lock of that particular episode that is only dialogue, and can kind of stand on its own in terms of the storytelling. And then I would meet with Palmer Heffron, the composer, and Daniel Benjamin, the sound designer, and we would go through the episode meticulously, talking about what we wanted for each little piece. Was there some particular odd little sound that we wanted, or how did we want the score to feel at this point, and what was the world that was happening, right? What was the weather? Was it daytime or nighttime? What kind of environmental sounds, those kinds of things, so that again we're creating a very immersive experience. But this play was really grounded in a very specific real world, a naturalistic real world, and finding what those sounds were. The other challenge, and actually I think one of the great things about doing this as a podcast is that, when you do this play live, you've got these many scenes with the citizens. You've got these crowd scenes. And of course, we know it's like you have 5 people who have to play 200 citizens. It's like
always embarrassing as an
really
actor.
hard. Really, really hard for those 5 actors who are playing the whole gigantic Roman crowd, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was wonderful to have an opportunity to really get to create those big crowd scenes with lots and lots of voices that didn't feel like those same 5 actors have to try to do it all. And then what's worse, of course, is when you get thrown up there and they just want you to ad lib. You just think, what am I supposed to say?
In this case, we left nothing to chance. We had Julie Foe, who was our voice and text coach, who happens to be steeped in knowledge in this era and in Shakespeare's work as well. She provided those ad libs. She wrote those ad libs out, and we scored them, we rehearsed them, we took takes of them, so that even the ad libs weren't just peas and carrots, which is when I was an undergrad, our instructor said, just go up there and say peas and carrots, peas and carrots.
It's just the worst thing as an actor. You feel so stupid.
Okay. So you told me this story when we were toasting the completion of the series. And I want you to tell our listeners, because it's just so indicative of kind of the detail that goes into making even the detail. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's the journey of the augur chant.
Oh, okay. The augur chant. Yeah.
So first of all, what is the augur chant? How did you encounter the augur chant? And how did we bring an augur chant into being in this series?
So Catherine Eaton, through her meticulous research, when she creates these episodes, she also steeps herself in the world of these plays, and she wrote into the episodes. So the episodes are if you were to look at them on the page, they look like a screenplay might look. And but so it's specific about what's happening in the background, or where the place happens to be, so that it helps the actors kind of get land in a place and begin to take on some of those given circumstances. And one of the things that she included a couple of times was this description of, an augur chanting. And I was like, what is an augur? So I started doing a little research, and I found out that the augurs were a order, kind of like a priest, an order of priests that would that they would watch the flights of birds, and they would determine whether it was an auspicious time to, say, hold an election or have a battle, or so they were kind of like soothsayers, or but they were experts at watching, bird flights, which I just thought was the most interesting kind of crazy thing. And I just became kind of fascinated with this idea of these augurs. And so there were a couple of times in the episodes where Catherine would say there's an augur chant in the background. Well, who knows what that is? Right? It's not like we have it recorded anywhere. And so when I started to talk to Palmer about these augur chants, are we going to do this, and what would it be? We knew that we wanted it to sound really ancient. And we thought, well, it could be Latin, right? but I decided I did a little more research, and I found, thank God for the internet, I found this thing, and I got to read it because I wouldn't know otherwise. It's called the Tablets of Aguvian. And apparently there are these tablets that were found with this pre-Latin language. And then I found a translation of this language, translated from this pre-Latin language, which is sometimes called Umbrian. It was written out in Umbrian, written out in Latin, and then written out in English. So you could see, you could read the English of what this ancient Umbrian language was saying. And they were these chants about, hopefully the entrails of this dead animal is going to, it's going to suggest that this is a great day for us to have a battle or something like that. So I then took, once I found some of this text and we thought, okay, we can use this text. I contacted David Carey, who is has been the head of voice and text at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And because I knew he spoke Latin. So I asked him if he would mind recording this for me. And he recorded it in Latin, and he also recorded it in this Umbrian language. To the best of his ability, he, phonetically figured out how to say it. And then Palmer, the composer, took that to her vocalist. The vocalist was able to listen to David's speaking of it, and then she sang these words to the music that Palmer composed. So you just hear this in the background a couple of times in episode 6 and episode 7. Of this, kind of chant in the background. But I think we succeeded in doing what we wanted, which is that we wanted it to sound very ancient.
See you that stone wedged in the Capitol's cornerstone over there?
What? What about that?
If it's possible for you to dislodge it just with your little finger, then there's some hope the ladies of Rome, especially his mother, could triumph with him. But I say there's no hope at all. We are sentenced with our throats waiting for execution.
Is it possible that in so short a time a man can change so much?
That level of specificity goes into everything in all of these episodes. And I just find it such a remarkable story because there is something so evocative about those augur chants. They feel weird. They feel authentic. They feel right. Mm-hmm. And it's because you did your homework. David did his homework. Palmer did her homework. Everybody went and left nothing to chance.
Right.
There was no winging it.
We did a similar thing with the song at the end when we knew we wanted a song at the very end of the last episode that was a kind of mournful song of kind of sending Coriolanus's spirit off to the next realm. And again, we thought, what is the language for this? Because it's not in the play. And again, I spent a bunch of time looking on the internet, and I just typed in Elizabethan songs of mourning. And I found this incredible just resource of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of poems, mourning poems from the Elizabethan era. And I just randomly started clicking through it because there were so many. I couldn't have gone through all of them. And I found one that the lyrics felt oddly appropriate. I showed it to Palmer and she rewrote the lyrics. She kind of kept the sense of it, but then, rearranged them, rewrote them. And about a half an hour later, she sent me a little MP3 of the tune with her rewritten lyrics and said, "What do you think about this?" And it was just beautiful. So, same kind of, that's so much fun. It's so much fun to work that way.
The great joy and there's something just profound in this kind of work when nobody knows where it's going, and then somehow something perfect happens that that nobody could have done on their own. It was through collaboration. Why are we in mourning at the end of this story?
It's so interesting how the play ends, and I find that every time I've seen the play or when I read the play, there's a very strange reversal that happens at the end where you suddenly are. I find I'm taken up. I'm surprised, and I'm sort of taken up short by a kind of a moment of surprise grief for this man Coriolanus, who you've spent a lot of the play disliking quite a lot. And the same thing, and it's also, you're also at that point, I think, following Aufidius's journey, because he finds himself in that moment surprised by his grief for this man who's been his enemy. You've also just experienced his brutal murder by a mob, and you are, I think, to me, it feels like you are, that there's something about Coriolanus is finally released, right? He is released from all of his, the turmoil that he feels in the play, and that release at the end happens for Aufidius. It happens to the citizens who kill him. Suddenly they are surprised by the level of their violence, and that his death in a sense is it's not heroic, and it's not heroic in any kind of traditional sense, but it sort of feels to me like a kind of that he's released from something about what I want to say, that it's like there's been kind of a waste in a sense, that he's been wasted in a way.
Right. The sort of, we're mourning the loss of potential.
Yeah, potential. Right. Yeah. Misplaced potential.
Right. And whose fault is it?
Yeah. Misused potential. And by everyone in the play. Especially
by the state.
Yeah.
You keep genders consistent with the original text. Why?
This goes back to the work that I do with Upstart Crow. I think it's really difficult to do these plays when you start switching the gender of the characters. I mean, it's done all the time, and it's done with different levels of success. Sometimes it's great, and sometimes it kind of, you start going down a pathway and you've changed the gender of a character, and it's like, oh, geez, now something isn't quite working out right. And, it's actually a more traditional way to look at the plays. If you keep the gender of all the characters the way they were originally written, then you don't run into that problem. So the only difference is that you've got female and non-binary actors playing roles rather than a lot of men, but the gender and the gender relationships stay the same. The plays are full of, and not just Coriolanus, but all of these political war plays are full of a very, very male, dominated patriarchal world. And it feels like that's part of the story that's being told. Part of the, and sometimes to disastrous ends, right? So I think that it's in some ways a really traditional way to look at the play.
Kate, thank you so much for talking with me. Kate Wisniewski, director, actor, producer, storyteller, maestra. Where can we learn more about what you're getting into next? Do you have a website? Is there, tell us.
Well, you can go to upstartcrowcollective.com. That would be, that's the place to check it out.
And you can look up Next Chapter Podcasts anywhere and find out what's happening at Next Chapter Podcasts and at Play On Podcasts. We're going to be getting into King Lear next, which is going to be an incredible ride. I look forward to all the interviews that are going to be coming out of that project, that 9-episode epic. And I thank you, Kate, for all of your time and your contributions to this incredible series. It's been an astounding success beyond anybody's expectations, and you had everything to do with that.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for letting me be part of this project.